Hey, what's up everyone? Tedrick85 here, and today I'm going to be talking about Episode 8 of Book 4 of Legend of Korra, titled Remembrances. And as you probably figure from the title of this is pretty much a recap episode where you get to see old clips in that, but it's done in a different style. This is kind of like the Legend of Korra series equivalent of the Ember Island Players episode of Avatar: Last Airbender, where we got to see the play at Ember Island, where we got to see pretty much the synopsis of the entire series there. And but this episode, like I just said, it was done differently in that, which I'll talk about more soon enough. But first thing I should say about this episode is that we get to hear the announcer at the very beginning saying about how honored he was about keeping a track of Korra's life and keeping a track of everything that's going around on not only in the public city but also in the rest of the world. And I gotta be honest, this really started to hit me because this really made me realize just how close we are to the end of the series. And to be honest, I'm a little bit sad by it. You know, I mean, sure, all good things must come to an end in that, but even hearing the announcer saying that that almost talking like something big is gonna end, which that's what this series has been. It's been big to all the fans and that's been so supportive of the series throughout. And just hearing him say that, it really got to me a little bit. And I admit I got a little teary-eyed. And even as I'm talking about this right now, I'm kind of getting a little emotional about it. So, but yeah, it's after this episode. There's gonna be five more, and that's gonna be it. And well, I'll discuss that in a little bit, but first thing about this episode, which I like, which this is a recap episode, but there is some new footage here, and the first thing that happened in this episode after the announcer talked was we see Mako trying to toughen Wu up, which Wu is a wimp. Everybody knows that. Trying to get toughening up, and every time Mako hits him, when he attempts to hit him, he goes down, and even Mako said himself, his catchphrase ends up being "woo down," and that's when Mako's uh, grandma goes over and comforts him, and like he's some kind of small child, which of course irks Mako, and of course when Mako is trying to toughen him up, that's when his grandma kind of steps in and pretty much slaps Mako or whatever, saying you need to lighten up on him and that. But while we get to see Mako and Wu interact, which Wu is trying to get toughened up, Wu ends up beginning the flashback sequences by telling Mako that he really doesn't know anything about him, which Mako replied that he never asked. So, inquisitive as what he is, Prince Wu actually sits down with Mako on that because he heard Mako saying that he didn't have a special girl in his life since he broke up with Korra, and this got Prince Wu intrigued. So he decides to sit down with Korra, with Mako and that, and Mako pretty much tells him the entire story, not only what happened with him and Korra, but pretty much everything that's happened so far. So, but yeah, I like this first part of the episode especially, including people like me. You know, I admit I've been kind of hard on Mako in the past. You know, I don't think his character is as good as what it should be in that. I think he's kind of, I can't say that he's dull, but at the same time, though, he's not quite. He doesn't quite have as dynamic of a personality as, say, like Bolin or Korra or even Asami. And I think this episode does a good job, specifically because it almost kind of, the way it's set up, it's almost like kind of like Mako's realizing what he's done and what he did in the past, not only with Korra and Asami. And in a way, he's kind of finding himself and realizing what he had in that and what he has now, and how he can use what he has now to make the world a better place and ultimately make himself happy. And another thing I really have to say about this flashback sequence with Mako and that is that not only do we get to see his past relationship with Korra and Asami, but the fact that we get to go all the way back to book one really brings the nostalgia into this episode because it's been 2, 3 years since the series premiered. So but yeah, it's kind of weird now looking back at what book one was and seeing the whole Amon and the Equalist conflict and stuff like that, and that really brought back memories to whenever when I first heard that there was going to be a Legend of Korra series, which is a sequel to the Avatar, the original series, and that. And it brought back those memories, and that it made me smile again, knowing not only what happened back then and how they were able to resolve that particular issue, but it's also nice to see how far Team Avatar has gone since, or has come since, uh, the first book of the series, and that, which, of course, people do criticize books 1 and book 2 a lot, which I can say it's kind of warranted because books 1 and 2 aren't nearly as developed as what the past book 3, and this one is. But whatever people may think about them, it's still a part of the series. Books 1 and 2 are still a part of the series, and they should be appreciated too. And if we didn't get to see what happened then, we won't get to appreciate what's going on now. So which is a pretty good segue to Asami and Korra, the middle part of the episode, where Asami brings Korra something, and that she brings her a cup of tea because she was worried that Korra was too cold, and it wasn't that she was cold, but Asami could sense that there was something up with Korra, and Korra then proceeds to tell Asami what her prior deals in that were, because Korra is still pondering about what Toph told her about the world not needing an avatar and that, and she ends up explaining her conflict with Amon and Unalaq and Vatu and the Dark Avatar and that, which, of course, Asami, being the good friend that she is very supportive of Korra, saying that Toph does not have a point in saying that, and that how many people that she's helped out, which she brought to example of the equalist movement. You know, she brought up how Korra became the hero by exposing Amon for who he was. Not only that, and her stopping the menace of the equalist movement, but she managed to tell Korra that she was also responsible for giving non-benders a voice in Republic City, something they really never had, other than Amon, which really isn't a really good voice to reason, so to speak. So, and of course, Korra proceeds to tell about the conflicts that she had with Zahir and the current one she has with Kuvira and that, and she says that she worries that no matter what goes on, that there's going to be more bad guys, more people that's going to want to do harm in the world, and here Tenzin ends up dropping by, and he pretty much says that he agrees with Korra, much to Korra and Asami's amazement. Which Tenzin explains that, which tells Korra that, yeah, that there's going to be some imbalances in there due to whatever conflicts come by, but it's how you come out of them that makes you who you really are. He proceeds to tell Korra that when he first met her, and that about how naive and that, and how hot-headed, and how she wouldn't listen to people, and just how stubborn she was, and he tells her how much she's grown in that, and how much she's willing to put other people ahead of herself. And that made Korra feel better in that. And so, and that's pretty much the middle part of the episode, and the last part of the episode focuses on Bolin and Varric, which I must say this is the comic relief of this episode, and rightfully so, because everybody knows anybody that's watched the show knows what kind of character Varric is. He's pretty much a goofball, you know. Yeah, he's a genius, but at the same time, he's silly in that. And other than besides him working on the spirit vine technology and that, we get reminded that he was also in the mover business, and he talks about how he could turn Bolin's life into like a next Knuckluck movie mover rather, where he ends up being the hero and how he gets to fight this this super zombie Amon, which I thought was pretty funny, and he also discusses about how he wants Bolin to take on Zahir, who ends up teaming up with Vatu and that, and of course Bolin is like, how is that even happening and that, and Bear keeps on interrupting, saying, hey, don't let a good mind be interrupted in that, so, and, but yeah, he ends up recollecting, reminiscing on the entire series, but in a rather unique way, as almost as if he wants to turn it into like a blockbuster mover. And that's where Bolin and that he pretty much juxtaposed Bolin into the Avatar role. Which I have to admit that the funniest part was seeing that part where Dark Avatar ends up being real big, and here, of course, Korra ends up being that giant spirit, which that was another part that Korra and Asami thought that was pretty cool, how Korra turned into that giant spirit, but when Varric was talking about it, this giant spirit, Korra's giant spirit, ended up her face and getting replaced with Bolin's, which I thought was pretty cool on the animator's part to be able to do that in this episode. But you get to see where, of course, it seems like he's fighting in that Dark Avatar, and we also see how Varric has it where Amon gets kind of pushed aside, where and that Bolin is actually the one that came up with the idea about the airbenders making that huge tornado and stopping Zahir and that. And of course, if we go, according to Varric, if we go by Bolin's story and that, it would end up being boring, which, much to Bolin's disappointment, the fugitive waterbenders and firebenders agreed with Varric on this and that. They seem to be very entertained at what Varric was saying, which I thought was pretty funny. But yeah, not only did this last part of the episode, not only did it make for good comic relief, but it made for a good ending to this episode because this is there's actually a source from I think it's from Brian Konietzko's Twitter, in which he was talking about this episode, giving some insight about this episode, and he said it's pretty much gonna be the last lighthearted episode before stuff gets real, and you can definitely tell by the tone of this episode and that. It was definitely lighthearted. Of course, when Mako was telling his story, Prince Wu and the guy that was with him and that were pretty much making fun of Mako and that for blowing it with Korra and Asami and that, so the amount of comedy in that and lightheartedness in this episode makes for a really nice break before the final 5 episodes, which is being hinted as being where the real stuff happens in that, and the true resolution of book 4 is going to happen. So, but yeah, for this being a an older clip episode, I actually liked how this was set up in that, and I like how Break didn't try to do the same thing they did with the Ember Island Players. They did something different with it, which was also something Brian Konietzko said. I'm pretty sure it was on his Twitter that he was talking about this episode, and he said that this episode was pretty much inspired by another anime series that he watched and that, and he was impressed at how they did the recap episodes. So, and I must say, I'm very impressed by how this episode turned out. So, but yeah, this is definitely among one of my favorite episodes of this book so far. Of course, every episode of this book has been good so far. So what am I talking about? So but yeah, it's like I said at the beginning of the video. It is kind of hitting me a little bit how the series is ending, and deep down I am gonna be sad about it. But which I know which they did with the original series. They're gonna have comics and that. They're gonna expand on this somehow. I'm pretty sure they will. So as sad as what myself and some of the other fans may be, there's gonna be life after this. So You know, it's like the old saying goes, don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened, and that's pretty much how I'm gonna approach the rest of this series and that, and that's definitely how I'm gonna approach the final 5 episodes and that. I'm just gonna have a big smile, be supportive of the show, be supportive of all the characters and that, and especially be supportive of the story and that, because everything's coming together nice, and that's pretty much it I have to say about this, so, thank you for watching this, and I'll see you again next time.